Now, as some of you may remember, a few years back I had this kind of crazy idea to create my own version of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And it wasn't going to be my usual sort of fan fiction that I do on this channel, which are basically just me reading a story I come up with and including a few images here and there, but rather something a little bigger and more elaborate than that. I even got a few dozen people on board, some animators, voice actors, editors, sound designers. It ended up being a rather large team of people. And though it was an awesome experience, I got to work with some truly great and extremely talented individuals from literally around the world, not to mention made some really good friends. But it kind of fell apart, which was mainly my fault. The whole thing ended up being a lot bigger than I ever originally intended. And though the work they were doing was pretty incredible, and as promised before, I'll be sharing the few completed scenes in a video soon enough, but it kind of became clear it was going to take a year or more, maybe even many more, to finish even just the first movie, or first episode, much less the whole trilogy at the level we were going at. And then when we tried to kind of scale it back, again, things just kind of eventually fell apart. But anyway, I have been asked many times in the past couple of years what was the gist of my idea behind it all, or what was the story going to be, what exactly would I have done with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And considering what George Lucas said a few days ago about how Disney didn't understand Star Wars or the Force, and that their sequels weren't what he would have done, I felt it was a good time to sort of dig this back up and talk about it again, starting with what my overall idea was. Though before even getting to that, I think the first question that needed to be answered or addressed, and it's one Disney kind of skipped right over, though it was the first one I asked myself when approaching this project, but it's how do you even justify the continuation of the story? How do you add a piece onto something that feels complete and perfectly satisfying as is, without it feeling like it's just an extension of the story for the sake of an extension to the story? Or maybe I should say or ask, did we even need a Star Wars sequel trilogy, or do we need one? Does that story, the story of the original trilogy and the prequels, the one that started with The Phantom Menace and ended with Return of the Jedi, does it need to continue? Is there anything left to resolve even? And no, that is not the same question as can there be more stories in a post-original trilogy time period with the very same characters? Because the answer to that question is a simple yes, of course there can be. But if you're going to call something Episode 7 and then 8 and 9, you're basically saying the ending of Episode 6 was not the ending of that particular story, that there was more story left to say or tell, as well as a more complete ending, and potentially a more satisfying one that we were yet to get. And that is a very bold thing to say, given the ending of Return of the Jedi, which, if you ask me, is a near perfect or flawless ending. We see the sad yet kind of beautiful, tragic ending of Anakin Skywalker's story, as well as can assume that Luke is now going to go on to create a new Jedi Order, and that with the Empire all but defeated, a new Republic will rise and preside over the galaxy. And together they will bring about peace and freedom, and there will be balance. And so if there's going to be a third part to that story, a third trilogy, I think those are the three aspects or three overall story arcs to keep in mind, and that would need to have some sort of final and potentially more satisfying or profound resolution in the third trilogy, or maybe I should say one that enhances those previous endings, the ending that we got for the Republic, the Jedi, and the Skywalker family. It doesn't necessarily need to be better, but it needs to mean something to those parts of the story. When Episode 9 ends, it needs to feel like that, again, it wasn't just an add-on, but it gave us some type of new aspect we didn't know about before, or some type of closure that we didn't get somehow with the ending of Return of the Jedi. And not that I want to get too much into this, but this is where Disney went wrong if you ask me. They failed right out of the gate, or before even leaving the gate really. Again, in my opinion, this is the first thing to figure out, what you even are going to do with this trilogy to justify it. But instead of anything like that, instead of carrying on those three arcs to continue it in a way that would not only mesh with or be an actual continuation of what came before, but that would also offer a more complete ending in some capacity, they kind of just decided to redo it all, to redo the whole story. They blew up the New Republic, they showed us that Luke's Jedi Order was a failure, and the Skywalker family was, to be very blunt about it, it was kind of hijacked by a Palpatine in the end. The last Skywalker is essentially the granddaughter of the one who caused so much misery for the family. That's not how you finish the story of the first two trilogies, that's how you overwrite it. And so, kind of moving into what I think you would have to do, or what I would do, or would have done, or started to do, was you have to begin the trilogy out with those three, with the Republic, the Jedi, and the Skywalker family, all doing relatively well. Everything doesn't have to be perfect for them, but we need to know that, yes, things are going pretty good. There are bumps in the road, or issues all three of them have, but what our heroes fought to restore, again, the Republic and the Jedi Order, that has indeed been restored, and the galaxy is much, much better off because of the actions of them in the previous trilogy, after everything fell apart in the trilogy before that. The victory in Return of the Jedi meant something. It was a turning point for the galaxy, the Jedi, and the Skywalker family, and it is not going to be undone by any sort of failing by our heroes, which is kind of what happens in the Disney sequel trilogy. Instead, just as, again, the Republic and Jedi are trying to really get back into their groove, shall we say, as they're trying to sort of figure out the last issues that are preventing pretty much everything from being great across the galaxy, a whole new problem comes out of nowhere and threatens everything. And I mean literally everything. This isn't going to be the remnants of the Empire reforged into a First Order. This isn't going to be the Sith somehow returning. This has to be something that threatens the galaxy and the Force itself. I wanted something that would test the Republic and the new Jedi Order, as well as the Skywalkers, something that takes them to their very limit and potentially will break them. So that when the third part of the trilogy is done, when Episode 9 is done, when this new threat is, of course, ultimately defeated, they will have passed the ultimate test, the ultimate stress test, if you will, and we will know that the Republic and the new Jedi Order will endure pretty much anything and be around for another 1,000 years or whatever. Again, we're not going to undo anything from the previous trilogy or trilogies or about the ending of Return of the Jedi, everything that was sacrificed and fought for. We're just going to reiterate or kind of confirm that everything is going to be okay for the galaxy for a while. This new Republic and this new Jedi Order, they can handle any threat that is thrown at them. And it's all thanks to everything our heroes fought for before, fighting the Empire and restoring the Jedi Order. Though, yes, of course, there will be a cost. There will be sacrifices that need to be made in order to ensure that bright future. There will always have to be sacrifices to be made. That is kind of one of the lessons of the prequels, that when you become complacent, when you stop being vigilant, that is when things fall apart. Furthermore, I wanted to create something that, to an extent, would honor the expanded universe. I love the expanded universe. I was sad to see it go when Disney took over, though I did understand their desire to tell new stories. I did get it. Doesn't mean I love it, I just understood it. And in this particular case, I'm going to try to tell my own story again, but that will certainly try to pay a sort of homage to some things from the EU, while then also taking what Lucas has said about what his sequel trilogy would have been, and trying to, as much as I can, based on the few things he has actually said about it. He really hasn't said much, but I do want to make something that would also go along with what I think he would have made. And I really do think Lucas was going to sort of finish the story of Star Wars. I think he was going to pull the curtain back and really let us see or know how this all works. He's talked a lot about how he was going to go into the microbiotic realm, and that it would have been in part about the wills, which are these one-celled or single-celled organisms that, his words, not mine, that they ride around in people like cars, and that in a sense they are the Force, yet they also feed off the Force. Furthermore, he said that the more of the Force that there is, the better off they are, or the happier, I guess, the wills are. And I really don't think he means feed off them in the literal sense where they are eating or consuming the Force somehow. I think, or maybe what I want to believe, is that he means something along the lines of how, for example, a sports team or a band or a musician or any kind of performer really, that they can feed off the energy of the crowd to sort of improve their performance, if you will. And then in turn, since the performance is better, the crowd is rewarded with a great show and they get even more into it, which feeds the performer even more. It's sort of like a symbiotic circle, you could say, which Lucas has basically said he was going to show more of in the sequels. And so how I kind of interpret all of this is that why the wills would want the Force to be balanced is because, as I've talked about many, many times before, balance in Star Wars is simply harmony. Balance is a system working as intended. It is the absence of the dark side and no one being overly selfish or anything like that. which then would cause misery or suffering across the galaxy when someone like Palpatine has control. No one is happy and everything is just, well, it's just bad. But when life in the galaxy isn't under such oppression, people are happy, people are joyful, and this is what the wills, of course, kind of feed off of. They feed off of positive energy, or something like that. I don't know. I don't know exactly where Lucas was going with all this, but maybe they sort of send out good vibes or something that are felt by the people of the galaxy that they are riding around in, as kind of strange as that may sound. Whatever it is, I think there's obviously a symbiotic circle at play here. That one of the benefits to the wills being able to eat good or being well fed is that the people of the galaxy some way somehow get a positive effect from that. Again, it is a symbiotic circle. The wills are eating good, the people in the galaxy are happy, and everything is just good. Though, personally, with my sequels, I wasn't going to go quite that deep into that aspect of things, into the wills and the microbiotic realm. I was going to imply or explore the idea that yes, the wills do want there to be balance, because when there is, it results in something positive for them, that they do indeed feed off of balance, again in a way that a performer would feed off the energy of the crowd. However, this balance that was brought about by the Chosen One, it has also attracted something else, something that does literally feed on or consume the Force, that destroys it. A sort of opposite to the wills, or an anti-force, you could even call it, which is not to be confused with the dark side, because the dark side is a part of the Force. It exists within it, or is created or maintained or fueled by those who are overly selfish, to put it really simply. Instead, what I'm talking about is something separate from the Force, something that seeks to cancel it out in a manner of speaking, and thus is not exactly easy for the Jedi to fight against or even understand. And so in episode 7, we were going to be introduced to what was called the Hexen. They are these very strange mechanical-like beings that are being used by the Anti-Force to kind of destroy the planets that have large amounts of Kyber or Kyber crystal on them. And that was something else I was really going to explore and get into as well. Early in the story, Luke, who is actually seeking a way to commune with the Force Ghosts again, because he has not seen them since Endor, and he feels like something is kind of blocking his ability to connect with them. And he, of course, wants to speak with them, hoping that he is doing things right, that he has become the Jedi he was supposed to be, and he has created the Jedi Order properly. This is one of the conflicts of Luke. He's trying to figure out what is the best way to run the Jedi Order. It would deal with things like attachments, and, well, Mara Jade would be in this story as well, and that would be part of his inner conflict. Is it right to have attachments, or is it not? Anyway, he comes across this race of beings that believe their ancestors' spirits, in a sense, that they live on in the Kyber crystals. That what Kyber is, in a sense, is a recorded history of the lives that have been lived across the galaxy, sort of like a way for the Force to remember or to learn from, in a manner of speaking. And this may all sound kind of crazy, like some of the things Lucas was saying, maybe even more so, I don't know. But it would have all made sense by the end of the story, I promise, or at least I think it would have. I was trying to do something different, yet very much in the spirit of Star Wars, in the spirit of Lucas, and just what people would expect out of Star Wars, which of course involves lightsabers, space battles, and that as well. So anyway, here, that is my very basic or core idea. That is my starting point. That is the question I needed to answer before I even thought about trying to tell this story. Does it need to be told in the first place? Is there any way I can, again, not necessarily give us a better ending, but an ending that perhaps enhances the previous one in Return of the Jedi, that just makes everything a little more fleshed out, I guess. That lets us know, yes, the Jedi Order and the Republic and the Skywalkers are all going to go on. What has been done before was successful. And so I wanted to create a trilogy that gave us sort of this ultimate test for the Republic, the Jedi, and the Skywalker family. I wanted something that threatened the Force itself, while also exploring the Force itself a bit more, like I think Lucas was going to do. There was also, of course, going to be much more to it than just that. One of the, I guess you could say, themes I really wanted to go with or hammer home, going along with how easy things can fall apart when you aren't vigilant, which is how the Republic and Jedi Order fell in the prequels. I was kind of talking about that before, and how hard it is to try and get those things back, how hard it is to get freedom back, which is what the original trilogy was kind of all about. And so yeah, one of the things I wanted to explore in this trilogy was how maintaining something is difficult but worthwhile. and that you should never let your guard down or become complacent, or evil will seep back in, or you won't be ready for the next big challenge if you are distracted by things that really aren't worth being distracted by. I also really wanted to create something that felt very connected to the previous two trilogies, that was going to, again, feel like a continuation of the story that both enhanced what had happened before, while also expanding perhaps your understanding of some of the things that happened before, not in a way that is intrusive, but in a way, again, that enhances and feels like it is justifying getting this continuation. And speaking of continuing, if people want, and though I have got a few other projects I have been working on for a while now, but if the response to this video is positive, perhaps I will try to carry on that story in some capacity. Perhaps I will try to get the story of my sequel trilogy out there in some way, shape, or form. But for now, that is going to be all I got for you this time. So now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. What do you think about my foundation for the sequel trilogy, my starting point? Would this have been a better approach? Is it a good one? Or maybe you think it's not. Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.